Thank you for staying tuned. Still tea or coffee on High Impact Television. Now, we're talking about tackling corporate crime. And to do that with us is Mr. Jermaine Miller. Welcome to the show.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, first let's establish what corporate crime is. So what is corporate crime?
Corporate crime is basically when a corporation or entity commits certain things for the benefit, particularly financial benefit of that entity, or an individual from that corporation who commits the crime on behalf of the corporation.
Okay.
So it's actually rather interesting that you have to note that usually these individuals committing that particular crime don't actually think they're committing a crime. Because they're working on behalf of the company or corporation. They don't associate themselves with criminals, and they don't actually think they're actually committing a crime. So you have to note that they kind of think that they're higher, and it's okay to be doing.
Okay.
So who gets arrested? Is it the individual? Is it the corporation? Is it both of them?
Well, I'm not particularly saying that the person may not know that he's doing it for the corporation or actually committing a crime. They may very well know. However, they don't associate themselves with committing a crime. Like everyday business. When you think of corporate crimes or white-collar crimes, sometimes they associate the two together. And you think like, let's say, insider trading, right? Or let's say the most common is probably some type of fraud, right? Where you commit fraud, embezzlement, things like that, right? And you're knowingly doing it. However, maybe you're committed on behalf of this corporation to make that company more profitable.
Okay. Speaking of the types, what are the examples of corporate crime?
Well, like fraud. Again, embezzlement. Insider trading, when we're talking stocks and bonds and things like that, when people get the inside tips, and this is how people make money and things like that. And it's illegal to do that. It's illegal to operate it from that standpoint.
Okay.
I want to assume that you would have, at one point or another, come in contact with a corporate crime case. What I am intrigued by, however, is how corporate crime escalates very quickly. So can you give us, like a projection of how it affects the economy and affects the society at large?
Well, in particular, in investigating corporate crimes, where I do my police work and my detective work in New York City, we're so big of a company, or we don't want to call it a company, we're so big of a police department, right? That we have different divisions and units that investigate those crimes. I don't belong to that particular division. I can talk to you about, and we can talk about how the investigation may take place without getting into details of an actual investigation, right? Because all investigations are considered to be confidential and private until it actually comes to a halt. But in terms of how these particular crimes can affect economies, just think if you are embezzling money from a corporation or anything like that, essentially what you could be doing is you could be probably paying your people more money, but instead you're embezzling the money from the company, and that might be going to maybe the top 1% of that particular company, right? And so the people who are working, who are actually making that product be what it is, they're not getting the financial benefit from it. However, the owners might be getting the financial benefit from it. So when we talk economy, the less that the average person can make, they can't actually put into the economy. However, the top 1% can always continue to do so, right? So it's going to affect the economy in a negative way just because of that.
Have we had situations where companies and corporate organizations have found a way to subvert the law and, find leverage within places where policies are made just to ensure that laws are being watered down to help them perpetrate more crimes, as it were? Considering the fact that most corporate crimes are more financially directed than otherwise.
I think in any instance, right? There's a saying that goes, money is power or money talks, right? So if you have a certain amount of money, you can probably get away with a
Doing
certain
certain
amount of things where the average citizen, it's not going to happen, right? So because you can't, one, hire the higher powered attorney, and let's just face it, you can't pay off people that you want to pay off because you don't have that money. And so when you are, and when you talk about circumventing laws,
Yes.
they will find loopholes, and big time lawyers are very good at that, of finding loopholes that will say, and wording is everything, right? So words matter. So you can write up a law, and inside of that, if you don't truly understand that, there's probably a phrase here that will help circumvent that. And if you are very smart at it and you have the money to do so and to pay somebody for the time, they can then go and use that loophole to get you off from that crime. So it happens everywhere.
Is that why it looks like corporate crime is not, unlike robbery and homicide and murder and theft
It's like it's
and
not
stuff
properly
like that?
tackled.
Yeah, is that why it's difficult to really pin corporate criminals, so to speak, and set them behind bars?
Well, I think that in some instances they do get caught. Again, I think that it's not publicized as much as a robbery or a homicide or something like that, because the media, people have to tune in. And corporate crimes are pretty boring, right? So you're not going to want to, unless your finances are a part of that particular crime, and let's say trading, stuff like that, and you're directly losing money, and so you're following the trades every day, right? Then now you have a personal interest within this, so you may pay attention to that. But in the media, homicides and robberies are sensationalized, so you want to tune in when you hear that someone was killed and you hear that someone was robbed. You're tuning in to see that, and so it's not that the corporate crimes are not occurring, and it's not that they're not actually being caught. It's that you may not see it, you may not know it. And sometimes when we talk about who's in charge of investigating those crimes, depending on the level of it, you have it at a state level or a federal level, and you may never hear about it if it's from a federal level or a state level. They're not going to publicize it as much. That's just a big name, and it's a big name. Then it gets publicized because now the media gets involved because it's a big name.
All right, so we're talking about investigating it, and over the break we were talking about who. So now, who investigates corporate crimes?
So like I said, you have different types of corporate crimes, and you have things that can be considered a corporate crime, but on a local level, right? And then a local department would do that, right? You have things that might be a corporate crime considered on a state level, where this company or this corporation is governed by the state, and they follow state laws. And then you have federal companies that follow federal regulations and federal laws. And so when you break those federal laws, the federal entity can take over then. And depending on where you are, what country, like I said, what region, what country you're in, they're going to jump in and investigate. The initial investigation could be done by the local law enforcement, and then it's the federal government supersedes them, and they take over. Same thing goes for state. So it all depends on what type of crime is occurring and who has the jurisdiction. They'll supersede anyone else, and they'll begin to investigate it.
So what type of legal penalties has been given for corporate crimes?
So I've seen different types of penalties. I've seen people do prison time for 10, 15 years. And I've seen people who should have done 10 or 15 years, but they got probation. They never saw jail. And again, you have the ability to negotiate that. You have the ability to have lawyers that can fight on your behalf. So it can vary.
Okay, but what's the highest level? what is the most, should I say the most grievous? What's the highest level of penalty when it as regards corporate crimes?
I think it depends where you are.
Okay.
So the way laws are written, especially if we talk the U.S., the way laws are written, they never give you, they can give you what we consider to be minimum and maximum. And depending on what it is, the maximum penalty can be life in prison, right? However, it may not occur because sometimes the law is written that says for this particular crime, Class A felony or Class B felony, the judge can impose a minimum sentence of 5 years or a maximum sentence of life in prison. The ultimate decision ends up coming from the judge sitting on the bench on what that judge decides to do.
So
Let's talk about,
Okay.
sorry, Dr. Let's talk about international collaborations on corporate crimes. So there's a company in the US that is embezzling and there's tax evasion going on and there's insider trading going on. And all of that money is being taken to another country outside the US, outside the entire continent.
Like what we have now.
You know, to invest in something else, to invest in other businesses that is in turn generating more revenue for such persons. The question is, whose jurisdiction, you know, does it fall to prosecute such a person if such crime is discovered?
So that's what I was going to get at. Well, where's the jurisdiction at?
Yeah.
So I think that what needs to happen is that it has to be a collaboration of both countries, right? So the problem then can occur is that if you have a country that does have an law enforcement agency or entity that can investigate and then a country that doesn't. So if the country that doesn't have that ability to investigate, what are the chances that they're going to allow this outside country to investigate? Kind of doesn't happen. So you need to be able to, these two countries need to be able to come together and collaborate on an investigation. And unless you have the ability to investigate in one country and the other country, it can happen. If you don't have it, it won't happen. Because there's not going to be one country who supersedes the other. You can't say that, well, you took the money and you put it here in this country, so you investigate. Well, they won't allow it. It's not going to happen. You know, one country is not going to say you can come in my country and take over and investigate and then arrest my people.
To enjoy more interesting episodes of Tea or Coffee, then like and subscribe.